Hello, you're watching TVP World News. I'm Jonasz Rewiński. US President Donald Trump said that there is a very good chance of Russia and Ukraine joining the US for a summit that could potentially lead to a cessation in hostilities. Trump's statement came just hours following his envoy Steve Witkoff's talks with Vladimir Putin, which the Kremlin described as useful and constructive.
Well, there's a very good prospect that they will, and we haven't determined where, but we had some very good talks with President Putin today, and there's a very good chance that we could be ending the end of that road. That road was long and continues to be long, but there's a good chance that there will be a meeting very soon. I don't call it a breakthrough. I mean, we've been working on this a long time. There are thousands of young people dying, mostly soldiers, but also, missiles being hit into Kiev and other places. But in terms of soldiers, I think Russia's lost over 20,000 since the beginning of the year, 20,000. And I guess the estimate for Ukraine is about 9,000. It's a terrible situation. We want to get it stopped. We don't have American soldiers there, but I feel I have an obligation to get it stopped.
Following US envoy Steve Witkoff's visit to Moscow, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said it seems Russia is now more inclined towards a ceasefire. Zelensky also said he spoke to the US president on the phone and that their joint position is clear. The war must come to an end.
On the way back from visiting our brigades here in the Sumy region, I spoke with President Trump. This conversation followed the visit of President Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff, to Moscow. Our joint position with our partners is absolutely clear. It is absolutely transparent. The war must end. And it must end honestly. That's very important. Honestly. European leaders were also on the call. I am grateful to each of them for their support. We discussed what was said in Moscow. It seems Russia is now more inclined toward a ceasefire.
An active duty US soldier has been arrested and charged with espionage after attempting to share sensitive information about Abrams tanks with Russia. The 22-year-old resident of El Paso is alleged to have transmitted technical information about the tank in June to a person believed to be a Russian intelligence officer in exchange for a Russian citizenship. The soldier, who held top-secret clearance in the US Army, allegedly said online that he was willing to, I quote, volunteer to assist the Russian Federation. US prosecutors allege that the 22-year-old delivered a piece of Abrams tank hardware to a storage unit in Texas, later sending a mission accomplished message to his handlers. In a later separate meeting in July, the US soldier allegedly provided an SD card to the Russian individual containing controlled technical data on the tank, another armored vehicle, as well as certain combat operations. The chief of the US Army Counterintelligence Command, Brigadier General Sean Stinson, called the arrest an alarming reminder of the serious threats facing the US Army. The United States will impose a tariff of about 100% on semiconductor chips imported into the country. While announcing the tariff, the US president added that it would not apply to companies that had made a commitment to manufacture in the United States.
We'll be putting a tariff on of approximately 100% on chips and semiconductors. But if you're building in the United States of America, there's no charge, even though you're building and you're not producing yet in terms of the big numbers of jobs and all of the things that you're building. If you're building, there will be no charge. So I just want everyone to know that. And I didn't even tell you that inside. We discussed the concept, but I didn't. So it's a big factor. So 100% tariff on all chips and semiconductors coming into the United States.
Poland's new president, Karol Nawrocki, delivered an inauguration speech on Wednesday, outlining the principles of his foreign policy agenda. During his election campaign, he has expressed criticism of the European Union as well as Ukraine, marking a shift from the approach of his predecessor. However, in Wednesday's address, the issue of Ukraine was conspicuously absent. Michel von Blumenstein reports.
In his acceptance speech, new Polish President Karol Nawrocki was clear about what he thought of the European Union.
I will, of course, support our relations within the European Union, but I will not agree to the European Union taking away competencies from Poland, especially those that are not mentioned in the European treaties, and they should remain unchanged.
And he was clear about his priorities in relationship building.
I will support our most important alliances, including our bilateral partnerships with the United States. And I will also look after Poland's position within NATO.
Nawrocki did not refer directly to the Russian full-scale war in Ukraine or to the continued Polish support for Kyiv. Capitalizing on the growing skepticism towards Ukraine among Polish voters, Nawrocki frequently voiced his opposition to Ukraine joining the EU or even NATO during his campaign, which put him firmly at odds with his predecessor, fellow conservative Andrzej Duda.
Karol Nawrocki decided to show some assertive positions toward Ukraine, but it doesn't mean that he will stop the support from Poland or stop, for example, fighting with the Russian propaganda, Russian activity in European Union or NATO countries.
A specific foreign policy item Nawrocki does champion is his wish to expand the Bucharest Nine. The group of countries that make up NATO's eastern flank should bring in the alliance's newest members, Sweden and Finland, to strengthen it. But as analyst Andreas Umland told TVP World, this would require some ideological gymnastics on Nawrocki's part.
If he goes this way, if he tries to improve with his instruments the connections to the Nordic countries, that will of course mean that a very pro-Ukrainian stance in foreign affairs, a very Russia-critical approach, and also a pro-European approach.
At the same time, Nawrocki prides himself on his good relationship with US President Donald Trump. That, according to some pundits, is a great advantage.
Remember that even our government, which is less liberal and more critics towards Donald Trump, now try to build a good relation with the Trump. Because for everybody in Poland is obviously that Polish security depends on the US.
Ultimately, Poland's foreign policy is set by the government of Prime Minister Donald Tusk. But Nawrocki seems poised to make his mark as well.
Niech Bóg błogosławi Polsce! Niech żyje Polska!
For TVP World, Michiel van Blommestein.
Lithuania's ruling Social Democrats have named Inga Ruginienė, the Minister of Social Security and Labour, as their candidate for Prime Minister. The announcement comes after former Prime Minister Gintautas Paluckas formally resigned on Monday. Ruginienė joined the party shortly before last year's elections, but quickly rose in popularity after introducing pension system reforms, a move discouraged by both the International Monetary Fund and the European Commission, but welcomed by the public. A strong supporter of Ukraine, Ruginienė says her priorities are social and geopolitical security and stability. Before entering politics, she spent years in trade unions and served as chair of the Lithuanian Trade Union Confederation. Her nomination now heads to the president and will then go before parliament for approval. A Georgian court has sentenced journalist Mzia Amaglobeli to 2 years in prison for slapping a police chief during an anti-government protest last October. Amaglobeli, who founded 2 independent media outlets in Georgia, was convicted in Batumi, the country's second-largest city, for violence against a law enforcement officer. In a surprise move, the judge downgraded the charge from assaulting a police officer to a lesser offense, resulting in a lighter sentence. Her sentencing has drawn international criticism. 24 Western diplomatic missions, including the EU, Canada and the UK, issued a joint statement condemning what they called growing intimidation of journalists in Georgia. Milorad Dodik, president of Republika Srpska, an entity inside Bosnia and Herzegovina, has called for a referendum on the legitimacy of his mandate. This follows the country's Central Election Commission revoking his mandate on Wednesday, after an appeals court sentenced him to jail and banned him from political activity for 6 years.
I am not speaking on my own behalf or in any personal capacity here. I am not expressing personal emotions, which are, of course, my private matter. The people gave me the mandate, and so we will listen to them in a referendum on me and my role, which, as we agreed based on the Assembly's decision, will be held in the near future. I am here, and I will remain here. I have no intention of leaving Republika Srpska or abandoning the responsibilities entrusted to me by the people. I will defeat them with their own weapon. Politics, because everything they have done so far has been political decisions disguised as judicial actions, destroying everything within the judicial system and the hierarchy of legal jurisdiction. We all know that Republika Srpska does not kneel. I will neither kneel nor crawl. I will fight, and I believe they will have trouble with that. I am convinced that good times are coming for Republika Srpska.
A high-stakes meeting at the White House this Friday could mark a turning point in one of the world's longest-running conflicts. The leaders of Armenia and Azerbaijan are set to meet with US President Donald Trump in a renewed bid to finalize a peace treaty, decades after the start of the Nagorno-Karabakh war. Diana Skaya reports on whether Friday's meeting will be the beginning of peace or the next chapter in a deadlock.
Hopefully, pretty soon, a peace deal between Azerbaijan and Armenia.
U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio hinting at what could unfold this Friday at the White House. Azerbaijan's President Ilham Aliyev and Armenia's Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan are heading to Washington for a rare meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump. The goal? Ending nearly 4 decades of war, or at least attempting to.
Given the unpredictable nature of the Trump administration, I do remain skeptical about the U.S. sustainability or any commitment to ensuring a durable, lasting peace the day after.
The two countries have clashed over Nagorno-Karabakh since the late 1980s. The latest chapter, Azerbaijan recaptured the disputed region in 2023. Prompting the exodus of over 100,000 ethnic Armenians. Last month, the UAE attempted to mediate between Pashinyan and Aliyev, a bilateral summit which was hailed as the first real breakthrough, and while tensions have eased, the timeline still hangs in the balance. And now Trump is stepping in, hoping to broker a legacy peace deal, but expectations remain mixed.
Armenia has always been quite ready to finalize and move on. However, on the other hand, I'm not sure even conclusion of a peace treaty will be enough for Azerbaijan, given their consistent and constant raising of yet new demands for concessions and compromises.
The summit falls on the same day Trump gave Putin a Ukraine ceasefire deadline.
It's all interconnected.
And while it could end a 30-year war and pull both countries away from Moscow's sphere of influence, it might just mark the beginning of a new diplomatic tug-of-war.
And that's all for now. Thank you for watching, and please stay with us here on TVP World.